Hello, I'm Rachel from Douentza Garden in Ireland, and you are very welcome to this houseplant repotting video. So in today's video I'm going to repot this very large Begonia luxurians that I have behind me. Now you may think this is not a begonia because it certainly doesn't look like one. Look at those gorgeous palmate leaves, and in fact this is the plant's common name, the palm-leafed begonia. It looks more like a scheffler than a begonia, but if you look closely you can see little leaflets right in there in the center of each leaf, and that is surely going to tell you that it's begonia, together with the cane-like structures on its legs. So today we're going to repot this beast, which I've had for 10 years. Can you believe? That's longer than I've been doing YouTube. And we are really just going to refresh the soil around it rather than put it into a bigger pot because, well, it's big enough. And after we've done that, I'm just going to give you a brief little glimpse at the other houseplants I have here in this room and just talk you through them because it's been a long time since I've done a houseplant update. So let's get on with the video. You are very welcome to this houseplant video, and for any of you that are new here, I want to say a great big welcome and to let you know that, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what zone I garden in, because houseplants are houseplants no matter where in the world you are. I suppose it might affect what a south-facing window means as opposed to a north-facing window if you're in a sunnier clime or a less sunny clime. But today we're talking specifically about houseplants and Begonia luxurians, which is this fantastic palm leaf begonia that I've grown for 10 years. And I thought I'd just give you a couple of care tips before we got on with the repotting of this plant. And I would like to say that it grows quite well for me as long as I keep it in the house. Now, when I got this plant 10 years ago, about 3 years later, somebody gifted me a second plant and I decided to experiment with it and keep it in the cool greenhouse. So I kept it there at a 5-degree minimum, that's 41 Fahrenheit, and the plant in winter goes into a kind of dormant state. The disadvantage of that was it was then very hard to wake up. So in the summer, after its mistreatment in winter, it took a long time to leaf up and be garden worthy. And I did want it in the garden because the first Begonia luxurians I ever saw was in a garden in Wicklow, June Blake's garden, and she had this fantastic plant planted in the ground during the summer. And I just thought, wow, that is fantastic. I have to get my hands on it. And I did. So I tried planting my second plant out in the garden here. And there were a couple of disadvantages. The first is that it does need shade. It's a begonia, it needs shade. And I could never give it quite enough shade because it's a big plant, it needs a big space. So like if some leaves were sticking out, then they would burn, and also it needs a lot of moisture, so it needed special additional watering, not just what the rain could provide. So it was quite troublesome, and in fact I ended up kind of putting it back in the shady area so it wouldn't burn. And then what was the point in that? Because if you're planting something out in the garden for summer, well, to be visible in the summer, then it needs to be visible. And if you then have to put it further back in the border where nobody's going to notice it, then there's no point really, is there? So I gave up on that a long time ago, and I now grow Begonia luxurians solely as a house plant. It is a thirsty plant, so it needs a lot of water, I find. Now, the information is that you should wait until about 1/3 of the soil has dried out completely before you re-water it. But whose finger is long enough to extend down there and feel 1/3 down? So I just, like, when the surface dries out, I just re-water it and kind of water a bit less in winter. In spring, I generally tend to prune it back by about a third or about a half. And the reason for that is it's quite a floppy plant. And you can see I actually have a metal support in here just to hold it up, because otherwise it would be lying down. So I always imagine that if you cut things back, then the new growth will be more sturdy. Also, it does tend to suffer from aphids. So often over the winter, it will acquire aphids. And although I spray and all that kind of thing, with such a big plant, it's impossible to get rid of something like aphids without cutting it back. So I would spray, I would cut it back, or maybe cut it back and then spray. And then in spring, leave it outdoors to just kind of get a bit of breeze about it, and perhaps the breeze will blow away the final few aphids. So that would be what would prompt me to cut this plant back in spring. And that's why it isn't taller than it should be for 10 years. So it's a 10-year-old plant. You should imagine that it would be like 10 foot high, but it's not. So a lovely plant, and it looks particularly lovely in spring when the new growth starts and when it comes into flower. Now the flowers are quite subtle, but they are a great addition to an otherwise wonderful plant that is grown primarily for its foliage. So, oh yeah, propagation. So propagation, you can propagate this plant by just cutting off the tips of the stem. Now I don't mean just the tips, maybe 10 inches long, something like that. I've propagated it by placing those tips in water. Some people have had success, I say success in inverted commas, with propagating it from leaf cuttings. The problem with propagating from leaf cuttings is that the roots will grow, but it will never push up shoots, so you won't get a plant from it. There you go. So repotting. Now repotting I have done at various times of year. I think probably the best time to repot would be spring, around about April, because the plant comes into active growth then. But I've repotted in October and I've repotted in March, and the plant has done fine. So at this time now I'm repotting in December, and I think it should be fine. So I guess what we need to do is to just move some of these plants back and lift this down onto the floor, because, yeah, this plant needs a repot. So welcome to my floor, and it's a bit hard to know what to do with this plant, because it's big and it's unwieldy, and it does have this metal support on it, which I'm wondering if I should take off first. But I'll tell you what, let's just lift the plant out of its outer pot. Let's try to anyway. Yeah, so there it is. And that's just an outer pot to catch water drips if I overwater, etc., etc. And I'm just wondering if I should take off the metal frame. I think I'll leave it on, because I might get it off all right, but then it'll be more difficult to get it on again. Maybe if I lie the plant down very carefully, trying not to break it. And you can see I've got this plastic membrane down here, because it would be good not to destroy the floor. Let's just move these things out of the way. I guess just start squeezing the pot. Excuse me, at the moment I have a cold, so things are difficult. Now just rotate it a bit, try trying not to damage the leaves. And if I put my hand in and try and pull, but it doesn't want to pull. I find that plants that need to be kept moist or require a lot of water do so much better in a plastic pot than in a clay pot, because you start to get molds and mosses and all that kind of thing in a clay pot. So I did have this plant in an ornamental pot a while ago, but I put it then into the plastic again. Okay, right, it's coming out. There we go. Right, so quite a big plastic pot. And this baby was repotted 3 years ago. So I'm just going to kind of remove some of the soil, trying to damage the roots as little as possible because it has very fine roots. And I think last time when I repotted, I used a mixture of potting mix and perlite, because there's very little information out there on Begonia luxurians and how to deal with it. And that's what I used. But this time I've got a fantastic mix from Botanica, and it's the Syngonium mix. The Syngonium mix is the one to use for Begonia luxurians. Now, I've talked about Botanica before, a fantastic Dutch company that makes houseplant composts that are peat-free, and many of them that I've used so far have done so well for my plants. So I'm hoping that the same will be the case for Begonia luxurians. Let's check out what the ingredients are. And in this product we have cocoa coir, activated carbon, pumice, perlite, coconut husk, chips, and organic nutrients. Sounds good to me. And if you check out their website, you'll find there's a guide on which mix to use for which plant. And if your plant isn't on their list, then you should contact them, because they're very responsive to that and they'll tell you which mix to use. And by the way, before, when I've talked about Botanica, I have mentioned a 5% discount, but at the moment, up until at some stage in December, there's actually a 20% discount. And I will put that discount code down in the description on this video so that you can avail. Why not give yourself a Christmas treat and do a little bit of repotting after your turkey and Christmas dinner. And wow, look what I just found at the very bottom of the pot. It's actually the label, the plant label. And somehow it got buried. Now I'm just working the mix off a bit, and it seems that the mix at the very base wanted to come off, suggesting that perhaps the pot is a little bit deeper than it should be. And then the main root ball is higher up. Now I think I have ordered too much of the mix, the Syngonium mix. I looked at the big pot and I ordered 2 bags, when in fact I don't think I'm going to be able to get much more compost off this root ball safely. So I'm not going to use that much mix. Now the inside of this pot is a little bit crusty, so I'm going to wash it out. Okay, so back again, jiggity jig with one clean pot, which I am going to endeavour to put my plant into. And the first thing I'll do is to just, manoeuvre it gently. I don't want to put the pot in all of this soil here, so I'll just place it back here a bit and open up my Botanica Syngonium mix. I'm just going to have to buy myself some Syngoniums now, aren't I? Since I can't use all of this, and I'm going to just put some at the bottom of the pot. So there we go. And now I'm going to lift my plant and maneuver it in. Oopsie. Oh dear, lost a leaf. And now I'm just going to place some of the mix in the holes around the plant. And I'll also top dress this a bit because I think I can see some roots at the very top surface of the soil, and that's not good. I shouldn't be able to see roots up there. And actually I can see some new growths starting here at the base, which is very nice. Oh, you'll notice that there are some canes here that have been, there are some canes here that have been removed completely. And I'll tell you the story behind that. Whenever I cut this plant back, I cut just above a node with the idea that the stem might branch from where I cut it. And sometimes, I'd say in about a quarter of all cases, what actually happens is that the stem dies back completely. Now, it's not such a big issue when you have a big plant like mine, but it might be a big issue if you have a small plant. And I've no idea why this happens. I think that's about done. It now remains for me to water the plant. And you may recall that when we repot begonias normally, I suppose I'm talking about Rex hybrids, then what you need to do is moisten the soil slightly and only give it a slight bit of water afterwards, not to absolutely drench it. And if you don't do that, then you're at risk of losing your begonia. However, I think Begonia luxurians is a bit different, and I am going to give it a good bit of water now, but keep it nice and warm. I've got the windows open there at the moment, but I will shut them, and keep it nice and warm, and hopefully this will go on and give me a fantastic spring display. I do hope so. So there you go. Right. So you've come all this way. Oh, there's my label. Let's put the label in here somewhere. So you've come all this way. I thought I might at least give you a little houseplant tour of the plants I have here in the kitchen. And by the magic of YouTube, you'll notice that this begonia is sitting there on the counter unpotted when we do the plant tour. It's Christmas miracle. I'm going to talk about the plants here in this section of my kitchen, so I'll start off by just giving it a gentle pan. And I guess the elephant in the room is this fantastic Monstera deliciosa, which I've just stood in the picture so that you can get a proper idea of exactly how big this monster is. Now, you've seen me repot it before, and indeed it's it's a very old plant because it was originally my mother's. Now, it has got a bit unruly at this stage, and I've had to lop off the top bits of the plant because it started to kind of come out and become unstable and all that kind of thing, which isn't ideal because the top of the plant is the most mature in aroids, and by doing that, I guess I'm discouraging the larger leaves, but it just had to be done. I'm in two minds as to what to do with this. I could actually propagate it and just start again and discard the main bulk of the plant, but it has a lot going for it because it sits here in a darker section of the room, and there's no window next to it. Over there we have north facing windows, and like directly in front of me, a good bit over, are the patio doors, that's west facing. South facing is a good way away from the plant, so it tolerates very low light, quite low light, and still does really well. So a very great low maintenance plant that does a super job of just adding a bit of a jungly feel to a room where you can't give it prime conditions that other, I suppose, fancier aroids would need to produce fantastic large leaves. So moving away from the aroid, and behind me we have north facing windows, and here we have my glorious Xanthosoma, which I am so pleased with. Now, I think I made a video when I actually bought this a while ago. It's an aroid, of course, which you can tell from the shape of the leaves, and it has really done well, and I'm thinking of repotting it and maybe making a video about repotting it. I really love it. It tends to like to be kept moist, but if you provide it with that, then it does so well. And behind me, which I'm actually blocking, I'm going to move out of the way now, and we can see my epiphytic Hippeastrum bulbs. So here we have Hippeastrum papilio, which is a fantastic, unusual Hippeastrum, an evergreen one that is actually epiphytic in nature. And I do have 2 bulbs in this pot now. Oh, it does need a repot. And the result of that is that I've had 3 flower spikes this year. So this one is in flower now, and this one has gone over. And at the very back, we have one that has just gone over. And it's a terrible shame that this spike didn't hold out for the video, because it would have been great to show you the 2 spikes in flower at the same time. And a little pan up my Begonia luxurians just before it was potted. Oh, the power of YouTube. Just here we have Dracaena fragrans, which is a really easy plant. I mean, I think you would have to try very hard to actually kill this. And normally people have the yellow form, but I like the green with the white stripes. I just think it's so lovely. And bulletproof plant, absolutely. And here on the windowsill is a very recent purchase. So this is a Monstera, not deliciosa, but Adansonii. And I bought it because I have something very specific in mind that I want to do with it. I want to grow it up a moss pole. Now, I don't mean a cocoa husk pole that you can buy in garden centres. This is a pole that has been completely packed with sphagnum moss on the inside to allow the roots to grow. It's a plant that lends itself very well to that kind of project, and I hope in time to get enormous leaves from this plant and to grow it very neatly up a pole. So stay tuned if you want to hear more about that project. Down here we have Aeonium Pink Witch, which I acquired recently in a plant swap, so thank you very much, Mairead. And in this corner we have 2 plants. At the very back we have my Dieffenbachia, which I've had I think about a year now, and I absolutely love it. It takes low light, and oh my goodness, I am so in love at the moment with low light houseplants, because generally speaking, houses in Ireland anyway, I mean, they don't have high light conditions, and anything that I do have are given over to the orchids. So how wonderful to have lush, beautiful leaves like this that tolerate low light situations. An absolute gem. And just to the left of it we have an orchid, and this is an Angrycum. It's the Darwin orchid, so it's one with the very long spurs, which you can see here at the back. See? All the way down here. And we all know the story how Darwin conjectured that if a plant existed with those spurs and needed to be pollinated using those spurs, then an animal must exist that could access them. And it wasn't until after he died that the moth with a very, very, very long tongue was discovered. So this plant produces very waxy flowers, quite large, and you can see if I put my hand in here, they are quite large, and they're scented, but it tends to be at night, and it's not the kind of scent that you can go up to the plant and sniff. It kind of comes in wafts across the room, so well, yeah, a bit more subtle than others. So I have 3 flowers this year from 2 flower spikes. My plant actually has a keiki at the side, which is another growth. And this keiki produced its own flower spike last year, which flowered, but it hasn't this year. So the 2 spikes are actually from the parent plant. The angraecum doesn't live in this dark corner normally. Normally it's on a south-facing window, but it's actually quite a large, unruly plant now with roots going every which way. So when it came in spike with the flowers coming out one way and the roots going out the back, it became too big for the windowsill. And the result of that was that I just brought it over here when it came into flower to make sure that the flowers wouldn't break. So now we're just having a little pan up the shelving. At the very bottom we have a bromeliad, then we have some frags, 1, 2, we have Begonia black fang, and I think it was last Christmas I bought the parent plant of this and took this cutting as backup because the parent plant had bad roots. Well, the parent died, but this one is doing well. And at the very top we have Pamiante, another epiphytic bulb. Let me just get that down so I can show you a little bit better. So this bulb has never flowered for me. It came to me as a seedling and it hasn't flowered yet, but I treat it like an orchid, and that means it gets orchid feed, it's potted in orchid mix, like the large bark, and it seems to be growing well. Of course it needs to come, I mean I put it out in the greenhouse in the summer, but it needs to come into the house in the winter, and yeah, so I'll be pleased if that ever comes into flower. And epiphytic bulbs, a very unusual collector's item, I would like to say. So you can see that here in my kitchen I have a mixture of things. I have the very, very mundane, like the Monstera deliciosa, which we all have, and the Dracaena, which we all have, and then I have unusual things as well. And why not, you know? Why not? We need some plants that just get on with it and do really well, and then it's good as well to be able to mix it up with things that are a bit unusual. So let's put him back there and have a look at the shelving over here. And down at the very bottom we have just a Christmas cactus. Then we have Pelia growing like mad. We have Begonia escargot also doing really well and looking quite magnificent, I must add. And a little frag orchid in bloom at the moment, and this one I do have to admit doesn't live here either. It's one that I brought down just to show you in the video. And speaking of which, oh, there are so many other plants I should have brought in, but I just forgot. And you can see that there's a second bud coming there. And then at the very top we have Begonia carolinifolia. Again, I'm going to take this plant down for a proper look. So this is an unusual begonia, and it is considered to be a caudex plant, which you can see from the fact that it has a caudex in there, like a root that sits proud. And this one was doing very badly for me during the summer. It started to rot out in the greenhouse. Actually, I've overwintered this in the greenhouse at a 5-degree minimum normally. That's for 41 Fahrenheit, I beg your pardon. And during the summer I did notice it started to rot, so cut off the rot bit and then just tried to coax the remaining tuber into growth. And I think it's a success story because it has done well. It now needs to be repotted because you can see it's banging its nose against the edge of the pot. Kind of needs a shallow, long pot, I think. So that's a project for later on. But I love this and I'm very glad I didn't lose it. And then the only other thing that I wanted to show you over this neck of the woods was the Douentza marginata. I think I made a care video about this. Another bulletproof plant that just, I mean, it just gets on with it. I guess I care for it less than some of the others because it does have long legs. It gets long legs and then the foliage is just at the top. Now you can propagate it, cut it and put them into the soil and then have like several plants in the one pot with foliage at different levels, which I guess I should think about doing. But yeah, you just have to love plants that just get on with it. And that brings me to the end of this Begonia luxurians repotting video and my mini house tour, which I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're all ready for Christmas, and that reminds me to let you know that I will probably publish one last video before Christmas. That would be on Sunday, Christmas Eve, something simple. And if my moss pole arrives for my vanilla, then it will be a vanilla repotting video. If not, then I wish you a very happy and Merry Christmas. And if so, well, I'll see you then on Christmas Eve. Thanks as always for watching, and I will see you on the next video. Bye!